Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario. Today you are 25. You just finished law school, but you have all this wealth of knowledge that you've built over the last 46 years. You're a young man with an older man's knowledge base. You start your own law firm. What do you do to scale it up quickly?
If you understand those elements when you're advertising, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, just think about a lawyer. I mean, whether you see it on television or you have an opportunity to see it in the courtroom, how they conduct themselves and how they try to sell the jury. I mean, you have to be honest, you have to be affable, you have to be likable, you have to tell a story.
Hi there. I have a small but really meaningful favor to ask you. I watch at the stats on our YouTube channel and Spotify channel, wherever most people listen and watch our podcast. And I see that over 80% of everybody who listens to it regularly is not a subscriber. I'm asking you to subscribe to this channel. And the reason for that is my mission and the mission of my team is to help as many small law firm owners to learn how to transform their law firms into better businesses, and so they in turn enjoy better lives. When you hit subscribe button, you tell these platforms that this is content worth listening, worth viewing, and they in turn will show it to many other small law firm owners and hopefully help me fulfill our mission of helping them create a better business and enjoy better lives. So would you please do me this favor? It would mean the world to me, and hit the subscribe button. And my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard at creating good content with practical ideas that help you and your teams grow better law firms. Thank you.
Welcome to another podcast episode of GLF. I have an amazing guest with me here today. Harlan Schillinger, also known as the grandfather of legal advertising, has been in the legal marketing and advertising industry since the year I started breathing, 1978. Harlan, welcome to the show.
Sasha, thank you so much.
It is absolutely terrific and an honor to have you here. You have been in this industry longer than anyone I have met. Over 46 years, you must have accumulated tremendous amount of expertise, experience, and I'm hoping that during this podcast, you could shower us with some of the wisdoms. But before we go into experience, tell us how you started in this thing all the way back in 1978.
Well, that's an interesting question. I was involved with my company, Madison, Meiskens & Jones, and we were producing syndicated television commercials for very high-end retailers. We were able to get a high-end jewelry store, hypothetically. I was doing the De Beers commercials at the time on a national level, and we came up with this idea of syndication, which is similar to the way television works. You build a product, you build a show, and then you sell it to different affiliates. We took a flyer on legal. I noticed that the law changed, obviously, in 1977. In 1978, we produced a series of television commercials, not even having a client, and took a wing and a prayer and decided that this is going to be a big category. We were looking for opportunity, and we produced a series of television commercials, and we filmed them in northwestern corner of Connecticut, and that's how we really began. Kind of fell into it, took a chance, didn't have a client, and we produced these commercials and then fanned out and sold them to lawyers.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was really weird. It was in 1979. In fact, I just found my very first television commercial, a series of commercials that we produced. I'm being brought into the National Trailers Advertising Hall of Fame, and the individual that's going to introduce me said, well, do you have any videos? So, I really haven't really been looking at, for these, and I stumbled across them, of course, and it's amazing. The commercials that we produced back in 79, 1980, you could run today, with the exception of the hairdos and the clothing.
Well, that's very interesting. So I started copywriting many years ago, and what I found is that the best copywriters, and for those of you who may not know what copywriting is, it's not the same thing as content writing. It's not the same thing as producing articles. It's writing to sell, to offer a product or a service. The best copywriters of today studied the writings of copywriters of 1920s. They would reproduce those as best.
That's a very interesting point. My mentor was a gentleman named Bill Meiskens. Bill was the executive creative director of J. Walter Thompson. He had that same position with Y&R and William Esty. Those are iconic agencies, from back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Bill was one of the true creators of television back in 1948. He had an itching to leave Madison Avenue and start this syndication company. At the time, he was producing, the Noxema Take It Off, Take It All Off ads with Joe Namath, and was the star, and was associated with a company called Madison Films. And he got together. He had this idea. I met Bill because I moved in next door to him and wound up going to New York for 3 weeks in the car with him on a Monday, coming back on Thursday. And he turned to me and said, "Hey, kid, you want me to teach you how to make television commercials?" At 25, I had my first job. And I just turned around and I said, "Sure, that sounds very, very interesting." I mean, I was pretty excited, truthfully. I was containing myself. Somebody's going to teach me how to make television commercials. I envisioned me standing, like Cecil B. DeMille, and ordering everybody around. Of course, that's not how I started. I started moving sandbags. But I learned that business really from Bill and his associates. We produced a series of commercials in 1975. We set out. We all divided up the country, and I came back with more money than everybody else, so they made me a partner. Mm. And that's how I got started in this business. Everybody has a story, Sasha, and usually the stories have nothing to do with you being trained in college or, you bunk into somebody, but there's always a backstory. And I say the story very affectionately because I really started from the ground up.
That's amazing. If you were to recount, how many law firms do you think you worked with, consulted, produced advertising for over the last 46 years?
Oh, boy. I would say a couple of hundred. I would say I had my hand on probably 125, 130 law firms. I currently have a private consulting business, and I work with 9 or 10 clients there, which is a far cry less than when I had my agency. And I retired from my agency back in 2016. When I retired from my agency, we were in 96 markets. That is a pretty huge footprint, just doing lawyer commercials I'm talking about. That's a pretty big footprint. And the agency still is in business today, thriving. So I'd like to say I'd put my hand on probably 125, 140 practices.
Very interesting. So let's imagine a hypothetical scenario.
Say that again?
Let's imagine a hypothetical scenario. Today you are 25. You just finished the law school, but you have all this wealth of knowledge that you've built over the last 46 years. You're a young man with an older man's knowledge base. You start your own law firm. What do you do to scale it up quickly?
Well, the very first thing, that's an interesting question. That question I just answered on a Facebook post in a mastermind group that I belong to. And my answer was, number one, get out of law school and become a very good lawyer. Become a great lawyer. That's the number one thing that you have to do. 90% of the lawyers that are out there aren't great lawyers. I'm talking about really doing a good job for your clients. Business will come. Establish yourself as a good lawyer. Make a decision that you want to do what you signed up to do. Every lawyer takes a constitutional oath, an oath of office when they become a lawyer, a doctor, any professional. And they promise, I'm going to do this, 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 and that. Study that. Put it on the wall. Make that your edict. Make that your Bible on how you want to approach things. And then I would build a very strong digital base. In today's world, you have to have a foundation. And in advertising, you have to have a foundation. And you build a house on top of that. But the strongest foundation that you could have in this marketplace if you were a brand new lawyer or a seasoned lawyer, is a very strong digital position, strong website, a website that is client-centric and client-focused.
Okay, that's part of the blueprint. What else? What else is in that digital?
Well, I think in today's today's society, when I began, we didn't have social media. In fact, we didn't have computers. But social media is a tremendous platform and resource to validate who you are and how you do things. Social media is social, but it's also informative. Social media is a place that people go to see who you are. What is your personality? And having a strong digital foundation and having a strong social platform, these are things you can do with very, very little money. Because when you get out of law school, you have debt, you have obligations, you may have a family. You don't have the hundreds of thousands or the thousands or even the small amount of money to spend on, whether it's television or whether it's unpaid, we call paid media. So as a newcomer, to the sport of legal advertising, you got to find ways to get your name out there, quite frankly, without spending a lot of money, because you don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, some of the most successful lawyers who have scaled without money, I'll use one name, John Merrill. He's based here in Chicago, where I am, family law attorney, large law firm now. He started in 2009, during the Great Recession, with 2 babies, maxed out his credit cards. I think he now has the largest family law firm here in Chicago. But he leveraged.
I know the name. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, he got into this and he built a website. I mean, 2009, he was,
Correct.
he built a website. It was, if I'm not mistaken, it was a pretty basic website. I mean, he had to do it economically. And if I'm not mistaken, that was his foundation.
And he put money into advertising.
Well, I know a lot of people have put money into advertising, and back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, no matter what you did in advertising, you got calls. I mean, a tremendous amount of calls. And when we started legal advertising in 1980, I mean, we couldn't answer the phone quick enough, and it was falling off of our plates.
Obviously, not the same today. What do you see as effective form of advertising today, other than just having the website and social media presence?
I'm having a little difficulty hearing you. If you could turn your volume up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me speak right into the microphone. Is this any better?
That is a little better. Yes, Sasha. Thank you.
Good. So obviously today, just advertising does not make your phone ring very much, not like it used to be decades ago. So today, what do you see as the most effective forms of advertising, aside from the digital foundation that you mentioned, that is obvious today, the website, social media? What else works exceptionally well?
Well, social media works exceptionally well if you understand it and you know how to harness it. There are law firms that only do advertising or go after business on Facebook, and I know lawyers that do very well on TikTok. I think, I'm an old-fashioned guy. I believe in networking. I believe in, probably one of the best things you can do is get on television, to be a pundit, to comment. And the way to do that is send press releases out. The news will pick you up. I have a client in Los Angeles. I have a client in Orlando, and that's all that they really do. They're on CNN, they're on Fox. They get a tremendous amount of business, but they're very good lawyers. So when you say, what can you do in this marketplace that'll help you quickly? I believe that was the question.
Yep.
Is social media. I don't want to say free because it takes a lot of work to conduct yourselves properly on social media, and that time is money. But social media is being underplayed right now. I think that social media is obviously the fastest growing opportunity that we have.
Yeah, my guess is that maybe 3, 4, 5% of all law firms that are consumer-centric law firms are actually doing something with social media somewhat well. Overwhelming majority barely do anything.
Well, the word somewhat well
Somewhat well.
is
Not
very
excellent.
important because most people use social media, but do they do it well? Now, what does well mean? Well means you're engaging with the audience and the audience is attracted to the content that you're putting on there. That's to me what well means. Not just putting something on for the sake of putting it on. One of the things that people don't pay attention to is the analytics. The analytics of social media, which tells you who's engaging, how they're engaging, and so on, will tell you what's working and what isn't working. And they don't pay attention to that. They think just putting something on social because everybody else is putting something on social is the way to go. I disagree. I believe that you should be poignant. I think you should have a message and you should have a direction. Social media is social, so you have to be social, but you have to be informative. But the real reason people really go to social media is for validation.
Yeah, but a lot of consumers are there to be distracted, right? So most social media is not used as search engines. So you have to produce a lot of content. And this is what most law firm owners and lawyers, period, do not really want to do. Right? So a lot of marketing out there is done for you. But when it comes to social media content creation, good quality content creation, we're recording this early in 2025. Today, it's all video format. So you got to produce a lot of videos and not just do it at scale, but do it with authenticity. Not necessarily highly produced videos, but they still have to be very, very authentic in order for them to get any traction. And when I tell law firm owners that to get traction, you have to produce 2, 3, 4 dozen videos per month and publish them.
Well,
Nobody does.
you're opening up a whole box of conversation here.
Yes, I do.
Just to back up just a bit, the one thing that lawyers unfortunately don't do is pay attention to the details and pay attention to learn social media because they think that, well, I'm practicing law, I don't want to do this, and they hire somebody to do it, but they don't pay attention to what that person is doing. That's rampant in our business. And then they don't get results and they fire the vendor, but they don't pay attention to what is going on and participate. So when you say you have to produce 2 dozen videos a month, hypothetically, you're absolutely right because it is an entertaining medium. You have to be relevant. You have to produce something that somebody wants to hear. But if you just step back for a moment, the biggest priority right now that Google wants, whether it be on social or whether it be, is relevant content. Relevant contents means something interesting that the consumer absorbs and appreciates. It's useful. Lawyers should get scared. Anybody should get scared if they're told to have to produce, a dozen, 2 dozen videos a month. That's a lot, but you can hire somebody to do it, but you have to work with them to do it to get the right message across. And the right message is authenticity. And I believe you touched on that. Social media is raw. You can detect, who somebody is, whether they're a phony, whether they're real. Quite frankly, you talk about 12, 24 videos. I think you should do them all on cell phones and not do them orchestrated for social media. And that's much more authentic. And I think that's what you're expressing.
100%. When those videos are highly produced, there is lack of trust. Because it seems like there's a cameraman behind it, and there is a producer, and there is a script. And I think that all those videos, in order for them to be authentic, they should be in a Q&A format, except that there is no one asking you the question. I always think about this content strategy. That's what we refer to it as. You ask, they ask, you answer. So think about the last client call that you had. Think about the last prospective client call that you had. What questions did they ask? Then grab your phone, like you suggested, and just record a video answer. 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 60-second answers, and post them. That's the most authentic form. And I so appreciate that you brought up the idea of using mobile devices instead of having big cameras on your face and somebody behind the camera, because that makes it less authentic, in my opinion.
Sasha, I just want to interject this. My strategy from the very beginning, I learned this very, very early on, that if you speak to a jury, I understood jury trials, lawyers with juries, and how to speak to lawyers. I studied really great lawyers, from Belli to, I can go down the list of, all in the day, some of the greatest lawyers that we're aware of. And I came up with a strategy and I said, well, why can't we adapt that strategy to our marketing, to our communication? So in essence, to put it in a package, my strategy is to talk to the public the way I would a jury. Now, the strategy is when you're talking to a jury, number one, you want to be likable. Number two, you have to be credible. Number two, you get what you ask for. And if you understand those elements when you're advertising, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, just think about a lawyer. I mean, whether you see it on television or you have an opportunity to see it in the courtroom, how they conduct themselves and how they try to sell the jury. I mean, you have to be honest. You have to be affable. You have to be likable. You have to tell a story. And I've always adapted that to every bit of my advertising from day one. I don't really know any other advertiser that buys into that or has repeated that or understands that, because we have a society, that's all about I. If you take a look at all of the advertising and social media that's out there, it's I can do this, I'll do that, I'll get this, I'll get you more money than that. It's repetitive. So if you want to distinguish yourself differently, you got to stand out in the crowd. And you can either wear a clown outfit or you can say something rather intelligent. It's kind of like when we were in college and we went to the bars and we were trying to pick up, girls. Did we give them the same line that everybody else did, or did we genuinely become us and be vulnerable in our asking? Think about the results that you get.
It's a very, very interesting position. So speak to the market as if you were speaking to a jury. Be likable, be affable, be honest.
Tell a
And you will get
story.
what you ask for. Tell a story and you'll get what you ask for.
You get what you ask for. For instance, you have a really dear friend of mine in Chicago is probably the largest advertiser. And his message is, in a wreck, get a check. I think that's brilliant. However, I know that client very, very well, and I did a lot of work with him. And he's got a terrific business, unbelievably profitable. But his average settlement is $7,500. What is he asking for? If you're in a wreck and you need a check, I'll get you the check. He does very well with that, but he's not getting big cases. That's a classic example of getting what you ask for. I'm asking for a soft tissue case that I can turn quickly and make a buck. That's what he's asking for. Now, he happens to take in somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800 cases a month in 5 states. So if you add that up, that's phenomenal business. My business is the complete opposite. When I talk about you get what you ask for, every lawyer in the planet wants a good case. I want the big case. I want the great case. So they immediately go, I take serious accidents. Okay, everybody thinks their accidents are serious. So when you talk to a jury, again, you have to tell a story. Is the story about me or is it about you? Story has to be about you. I love testimonials for that reason. And I'm not talking about testimonials that have money involved. My client got me, or, he got me, $1 million. I'm talking about what did that client go through? What was their experience? What did that family feel? Tell the story to the jury of the pain and the suffering and the outcome. Now, I'm being a little dramatic with the pain and the suffering, and the advertising and such, but I think you get my point. As parents, we get what we ask for with our children. If we're constantly screaming at them, we're not going to get as good a response as if we sit down and we discuss why I'm asking you to do this. I'm just using that as an analogy. My business and my mentality, all of my life in this business, was aimed at getting quality cases. So you have to understand how to ask for quality cases. I believe you have to earn quality cases. And that's why I believe you have to be a good lawyer. And then how do you get that message out?
Very interesting. And that's why I believe you said that over 46 years, you worked with approximately 200 clients and not 20,000 clients. It seems like
Correct.
you're very, very selective about who you do business with.
Well, what's interesting with my agency, which is Network Affiliates, they're still in business, of course, and they're thriving, was that the kind of advertising that we produced really only could appeal to about 10% of the marketplace, the lawyer marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
It was high end, it was not speed and greed. 90% of all the advertising that's out there is speed and greed. I'll get you this, we'll get you that. I got more money than the last guy, and so on and so forth. But when I retired, I said I was in 96 markets. That's twice as much as anybody else. My competitors, I should say, the agencies and what have you. I had a certain niche. The niche was going after quality cases. So obviously I had to work with quality lawyers.
So when you said 90, you caught my attention when you said that not a ton of clients, but a ton of markets. Does it mean that many of your clients were in multiple markets?
Eventually they did grow into multiple markets. You move into, if let's say you're in Fort Lauderdale, the logical thing was to go to Tampa. I'm a real believer of really working on your home market opposed to expanding. But I certainly have, firms that expanded, and I had a very lengthy conversation, over an hour, last Friday with John Morgan about this. We talk periodically. Well, actually, we talk very often. I won't say we're periodic, maybe once a week or so. And he was talking about how many markets he moved into and how many markets he's going to move into. And how do you hold control of all that? It was a pretty intimate conversation. John and I are very good friends, and we compare notes quite often. It's interesting, in this marketplace right now, there are very few volume law firms that are growing. A lot of lawyers out there, there's not more accidents and what have you. So hypothetically, if you're a lawyer in Miami and you're taking in, let's say, 200 cases a month, it's very difficult to take 201 cases. You're going to pay much more for the 200. So if you want to expand your business, you're going to go into Fort Lauderdale, or you're going to go into a contiguous market or any other market. That's growth, but that's very, very long-term growth.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long-term strategy. You open up a new shop in Tampa, hypothetically, you're not going to see a nickel for it of 5 to 7 years. So yes, it's growth, but it's not immediate growth, very long-term growth.
Why is it exponentially more expensive to get to that 200 first case than the original 200 or the first 200?
Competition. I would say that's the most significant.
For the 200.
Sorry?
It's the same level of competition for the initial 200 cases as it is for the 201st one.
You would think. And back in the day, if we wanted to get 210 cases, I'd spend more money. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, there is so much competition right now, vying for the same client, that it is very difficult to multiply your numbers in today's marketplace. It's just, I wish I had a better answer. The answer is, let's just not spend much more money. But I do have an answer. The answer in profitability is to get better cases and settle those cases for more money.
Sure. If you're a better attorney.
Well, one of the dirty parts of our business is, and this is very controversial, but I'm edgy and controversial at times. 90% of the lawyers out there sell their clients short. You know what that means?
I understand what that means.
Yeah. Well, the public doesn't. And so if you have a firm that you set up, that you're basically a mill, or you have a process that you're pumping, cases through, are you really investing in those cases? Are you maximizing those dollars? So if I reach a bridge of 200 cases a month, hypothetically, what's my option? Get better cases and settle them for more money. First of all, it's more profitable to do that. It's more challenging, but you have to have that mentality and that business structure to do that, which means you have to be a good lawyer.
And a good business operator.
About 16 years ago, we were sitting on Keith Given's porch in Dothan, Alabama. Keith was the managing partner of the Cochran firm. And I'm sitting there with John Romano and Howard Nations and myself. And we came up with the idea of the business of law. Nobody did the business of law. That's where we met, at the business of law. And we came up with the conclusion that we should start a group that focuses solely on the business of law. And so National Trial Lawyers gave birth at that day to the business of law, and we were built on the business of law. And I remember Howard Nations, who's an unbelievable lawyer out of Houston, tremendous mentor of mine. He said, I'm a fantastic lawyer, and everybody knows that. But if I wasn't a good businessman, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Of course.
I remember my friend Mel Belli many, many, many years ago, sitting in his office in San Francisco, wanting to get into the advertising world and saying to me, I want to get into the advertising world, but I don't want to spend any money. And I said, Mel, you can't do that. We can't produce commercials for $300 a piece. He says, I'm a terrible businessman. I'm always going out of business because I don't know how to manage my money. And in today's society, if he was alive today, he would have brought in a business manager.
Yeah.
So it is a business. Sasha, it truly is a business, and you have to treat it as a business, but you also have to treat it as a profession.
Yeah, I think that's going to change, and here's why. So in the state of Arizona now, non-lawyers can own law firms. In the state of Colorado, it's coming down the pipeline. There are alternative business structures now.
Well, it's also in Utah right now as well.
And it's in Utah, right? So things are changing. And soon we may be seeing radical shift. And when I say soon, 5, 10, 15 years, we're recording this in 2025, we may see a radical shift in how law firms are managed. We may see private equity rolling into the legal world. It is quite possible where private equity will start managing a number of law firms because they'll roll them up under the same umbrella, finding them to be potentially very profitable businesses, as they can be, and operating them as corporations rather than law firms. We've seen that in the healthcare space.
Well, you've also seen that in the UK. I mean, they've been doing it for over 10 years.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
We studied the UK model. I was involved with the acquisition of Jacoby and Myers, to the Cochran firm, and that was, they had the sights set on that was going to be the overall brand. But the truth of the matter is, if you take a look at what went on to the UK, well, certainly, first of all, when a corporation owns a business, they're in it for profit. So the first thing they're going to look at is how profitable can we be? And what happened in the UK, what has happened in the UK is good and bad. Quite frankly, and I'll go to the Australian model, because I'm much more familiar with law firms in Australia. The quality of service really plummeted, truthfully, and it became a commodity. When corporations got involved, because they took a very insensitive approach to running the business. So I hope that what happens in our country isn't the same, but I believe that that's the path that's going to happen. I don't think that well, first of all, you have to understand, hedge money has not come into Arizona yet. When I talk about hedge fund money, a non-lawyer owning a law firm and infusing money into it, because hedge funds are not going to invest in a firm that can't collect money. And right now, you can only collect money in two venues. You can collect money in Arizona and in Washington, D.C. The Washington, D.C. model has been set up for quite some time. I am a partner in a law firm in Washington, D.C., and I'm a non-lawyer. But until you can collect money in every state, the ABS model is somewhat stalled. I believe personally it's going to go, and some people that I'm associated with that are a lot smarter than me, I think it's going to go to the Supreme Court just like the Bates decision went, and open it up so that you can collect money in every state. Hedge fund is not going to advertise in Iowa where they can't collect a fee and split a fee. And that's what's stalling things right now.
Yeah, but private equity, not hedge funds, but private equity can actually do it because now it's
I meant private equity.
Arizona, Utah, Colorado. That's a lot of population, a lot of business to be done.
Yeah, well, there's business to be done everywhere, and then what'll happen when private money, however you want to phrase it, comes into the scene, it will be run like a business. It'll be run like a corporation, and that's the path I think that's gonna go. Right now I know a number of firms that are positioning themselves for sale, position themselves, for an infusion of capital, however you want to phrase it, and they're setting themselves up with the right processes, setting themselves up with the right accountability, and so forth. I mean, this is definitely coming at us. How quickly it's coming at us, I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that until we collect money in every state, you can't advertise.
Yeah, and I think that if you're running a much smaller law firm, whether you're solo or you have 3, 5, 10 attorneys, you should be doing the same thing as larger firms.
Absolutely.
Processes.
Well, one of the best thing that's happened is technology. It's the good news, bad news. We don't want our kids, on their phones all the time, but we want to be able to reach them. And the same thing, technology is taking things over. But truthfully, whether you're running a 3-person law firm or you're running, a 100-person law firm or several thousand people like Morgan, you have to have processes. And software allows you to build a process and stick to the process in a repetitive way. That doesn't mean you say the same thing to everybody. That means you have a process on how you're going to process the call that comes in, a process to how you're advertising, the call that comes in, and process the case, process the advertising, process the prospect. So a process is the most important thing you can do. Again, getting back to somebody that's coming out of law school, set up your process. Know exactly how you're going to answer the phone, how you're going to follow up with phone calls, how you're going to deal with the client once you get the client. What process does the client fall in for communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every business should absolutely do it, whether you're a law firm, marketing company, or anything else. Systems that are built on processes, repeatable processes where you can examine quality and make sure that you have a process of continuous improvement. We have that in our marketing company. We have our 5 main departments. That's how I always think about all businesses. There's your marketing, there's your sales or intake for law firms, there's your operations, delivering the service that marketing promised. And then there is your HR, making sure that the right people are in the right places doing the right things without you telling them to do so. And then there's leadership that sets goals, make sure that there are plans for implementing those goals, achieving those goals rather, and everything else. And for each one of those functional zones, I call them RITs, revenue impact zones, you have processes that build up systems, and you're always looking for ways to improve that. Every person in each team, in my team anyway, they're responsible for coming up with ideas how to improve things, continually improve things. I always ask them, what are you working on improving? What are you working on improving? Borrowed that idea from Steve Jobs. What are you working on improving?
Well, that's important. I mean, even if running a household, you have to have a process. Okay, kids are going to come home from school. What are they going to do? What's the process? What's the, what's the path? Law firms are really embracing that, I have to say, in a very positive way, the process. I mean, there are some really great marketing companies out there. There's some great lawyers that are teaching their process to other people, on how successful they were. Morgan has done that. Mike Morse has done that. Glenn Lerner has done that. These are people that have these processes in place, and of course, they want to. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with ego and whatever. But they're teaching. We are all teachers. When you attended National Trial Lawyers, you saw a lot of people on stage, talking about their business and how they ran their business. And you had people in the audience taking notes and saying, I just learned something. I'm going to take that back to my office and I'm going to put it to work. But you're absolutely right, Sasha. It's all about, the process. I mean, the legal end has process.
100%. What's the most impactful advice anybody has ever given you?
Talk 52% of the time and excuse me, let me reverse that. Talk 48% of the time and listen 52% of the time. I think that's probably some of the best advice that I ever got. But I will tell you that every single day, my wife, when we wake up, she says this to me. I mean, it's starting to get really annoying, but she's absolutely right. Sasha, she says, be interested, Harlan, not interesting.
Yeah. How long have you been married for?
20 years.
Got it. And you split your residence between Arizona and Sturgis, South Dakota?
Spearfish, South Dakota. It's the town next to Sturgis. Next
to Sturgis. How'd you end up there? I think you're the first person I know who actually spends time, lives there.
Well, it's a fantastic state. In 1979, I went to Sturgis with a friend of mine, Mike Lichter, for the very first time. I'm into motorcycles. I belong to one of the most prestigious custom motorcycle clubs in the world. And, I'm pretty obsessed with motorcycles. I mean, I'm not riding and building bikes like I used to. But I wound up going to Sturgis and falling in love with the Black Hills. And I've been, to that event, every year since 1979. Many years ago, I helped build a condo development for our motorcycle group in Spearfish. It's a big enclave for motorcycles, and also the Hamsters is my motorcycle club. Very funny name. It's the most prestigious club in the world, and it's started by the best bike builders and manufacturers of parts. It was just a good old boys deal. Anyway, the long and short of it is we fell in love with it. When I retired from my agency, we already had a small house in Arizona. I spent my first summer in Arizona and spent my last summer in Arizona, and said, nope, we got to spend our summers in South Dakota. We've already got the house up there. And so I figured out, at the ripe old age of whatever, that I want to be where it's nice weather.
Harlan, it sounds like you're a lifelong learner, and you've accumulated a ton of expertise and wisdom over the years. Where do you get your inspiration, and how do you continue to learn today? And by the way, your memory is super sharp. Oh my God, you're just so impressive.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I think that you either have it in you or you don't. There's people that don't listen, and there's people that just listen. I'd like to find a happy spot in the middle. The truth of it is I feel like I'm a sponge, and I still feel that. Look, I just celebrated my 75th year, going around the sun. And in some respects, that's old. In other respects, I'm still very young. I surround myself with people smarter than I, and I'm open to learning. I'm hungry, and I think that is what drives me. I seek to learn. I have to learn, because if I'm going to bestow information on a client that's paying me, I better well know the subject. But I'm paid to help people grow their business. If I'm not continually learning, I'm not in the position to help them grow their business. But I think it has to be in you. I'm a curious guy. I mean, I love to learn. I'm like a sponge.
So 75 years young, learning as a sponge, riding motorcycles. What do you ride?
Well, on any given day, I mean, I've got an FXR in my garage. I have about 8 or 9 bikes. we still travel across the country a couple of times a year. So mostly Harleys and customs.
Got it. I used to ride for 20 plus years, sport bikes only, race them, dirt bikes also, but that was way, way back in the day. And I retired from that 3 years ago.
Yeah,
Too
it's a
many.
dangerous sport, you know. Certainly, I don't ride the way I used to. I mean, we were crazy when we don't know how we're still alive. You know, safety is the number one issue. Um, I manage a ride from California to Sturgis every year, and I've been managing it for 20 years, and we have about 150 bikes on the ride. It's an invitation thing. We pick a different ride route every year, and get there. And it's a passion that I'm not ready to give up.
Mhm.
You know,
Very
when I
interesting.
become unsafe and I don't have the whereabouts to be safe, then I will stop doing what I'm doing. But today I'm enjoying it, and I certainly don't do it as much as I used to. Um, but that's my passion.
Yeah. Do you remember who Sam Zell was? He just passed away a year or two ago.
Who is it?
Sam Zell.
Sam Zell.
Sam
Uh,
Zell was a
no.
big time real estate investor out of Chicago, built a multi billion dollar real estate empire, ended up buying the Tribune Company here in Chicago and so many other projects. He was known as Mr. Risk, meaning he knew how to manage risk exceptionally well to the point where they invited him to teach at one of the most prestigious MBA programs here in the University of Chicago. This being on any given day either number one or number two business school in the world. And he taught a class called Risk. And when he was interviewed 10, 15, 20 years ago, he was asked about his passion, which was riding motorcycles. In fact, he rode sport bikes well into his 70s. He was asked, how does that compute? You're all about risk management, and yet you ride sport motorcycles through the Alps. And he said, I know my risks. They're very well calculated. I never crash.
Well, yes, because he understands how to be defensive and
Yeah,
not
he was.
get into the accident. You know, when you get into an accident on a motorcycle, you're done for the most part. You can't get out of it. Can't I mean, you
You're in
can,
it.
but the
You're
truth
in
of the
it.
matter is, so when you ride a motorcycle, although it is incredibly risky, what you want to do is you want to minimize the risk by paying attention. You want to be safe.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things involved in being safe. That's interesting because I've heard many people talk about money and what have you. One of the first people that I ever really paid attention to is a gentleman other than Dale Carnegie, and I read his book every year. How to
Which
Win
one?
Friends and
Mm-hmm.
Influence People. A gentleman named Harvey McKay. He's from Chicago. He owned an envelope company.
Yep.
And I followed him, and I was just a kid in school when I started to read about him. And he was incredibly influential in my growth. Um, he just did things differently, and he talked a lot about risk. He talked about, if I remember correctly, he used the word calculated risk.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't risk, there's no adventure, and you're not going to get anywhere with if you're going to sit and not take any kind of a risk in life, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, entrepreneurs risk everything for what they believe in. If you take a look at the great minds, whether it's a Steve Jobs or whoever it is, they risk just about everything.
That is so absolutely true. Harlan, this was a riveting conversation. Thank you so much for sharing all of the insights and wisdoms that you have accumulated over the last 75 years. Congratulations on your success.
Oh, it's
It's an
such a
amazing
pleasure
story.
to talk with you.
Absolutely.